No, so I got a text just saying Steven Spielberg wants to meet with you, and it's not a text I had received before. We zoomed a couple more times, and then finally on our third Zoom, he had an unlit cigar in his mouth, and he said, "I think you'll make my dad proud," and that's how he told me I got the part.
I can't get the image of Steven Spielberg on a Zoom call with an unlit cigar.
I know. I want to know what his username is.
That's amazing.
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jenelle Riley from Variety. So pleased to welcome this year's SAG Award nominees for Outstanding Male Actor in a Supporting Role, Paul Dano, Brendan Gleeson, Huy Quan, and Eddie Redmayne. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes, you're also polite. This is primarily for an audience of your fellow SAG-AFTRA actors. And so I always like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card? And the funny thing is, I think I've asked most of you this before, and I always forget because I ask this a lot, but you all have very memorable stories. So I think I actually remember some of yours. But let's start with Eddie.
I love, that you think my story was memorable, because I don't think it is particularly memorable. It was a film many years ago, about 2005, 2006, I think. I spent a long time auditioning for a film, and it was, I think, virtually my first film, and it was directed by Robert De Niro, which was extraordinary and terrifying. And it was a long audition process. And when I was lucky enough to get the part, I was overjoyed. But then with that came having to get a visa, but my SAG card. So I was thrilled when eventually the visa came through. I hadn't realised there was another sort of hurdle to jump. But then the SAG card came with that. I've been a proud member of SAG since then.
And who were your parents in that movie?
My parents were Angelina Jolie and Matt Damon. And I was basically, I have big lips.
Paul, what about for you?
I got my equity card when I was like 10 doing theater in New York. And then I think I got my SAG card when I did my first film, which was called LIE, when I was 16 years old. And it was a theater casting agent who cast that film. So I think that's sort of why I was brought in, and it worked out. And so I've been here for a bit, and I can't believe I'm still doing it and get to be here today.
LIE was your first movie? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I think I've done maybe a TV movie, and I've done one commercial, but mostly theater. Most at that point, auditions hadn't panned out. Yeah.
Wow, right out of the gates. That's insane. Just you and Brian Cox.
Yeah, it's not, I've not rewatched the film, but I had a wonderful experience. It's also the subject matter is challenging for a young person. And my recollection is I didn't know you even had a choice as an actor. So it's like, yeah, okay, I'll of course I'll do it. Yeah.
Brendan, for you?
I think it was Turbulence, my first venture into filmmaking in America. And yeah, I'd come over, I think, on the strength of Braveheart in around 95, I think. And I hooked up with Joan Scott, and I remember I went for an audition in New York about a film which was set on the American-Canadian border, and there were people escaping across the border from prison. And I attempted my first American accent, and Ian Hart was in New York at the time, and he told me that I rang him up and I said, I just destroyed my whatever potential career I've had. And he said, oh, I've just done the same. He said, and he used the expression, I drove home from the audition with my teeth, which which meant he drove home like that for the entire drive home because of the mortification he felt at how he had auditioned. But I said, okay, forget that. Okay, live and learn. And I went out to LA to hook up with Joan Scott. And I was given a second shot at it, but they asked me, would I do a slightly amended accent? And when I read the script the second time, it had moved from the Canadian border to a 747 between New York and LA. So I got the the idea then that, yeah, things are not so much as they seem necessarily at the beginning of this whole process. So that was when I got to work in America, and it was extraordinary. I remember thinking, wow, I'm working at the factory in a factory town. Everywhere I walked up along the road, people were discussing scripts. Everybody was in the industry. It was an extraordinary kind of eye-opener into the way the city embraces film. So that's when all the SAG things started then.
I'm curious because I heard something the other day. How old were you when you did your first movie?
Let's see. My first movie, I would have been, I think, well, Braveheart is about, I think I might have been 38 or something. I did a lot of theater. I was 34, but no, maybe 5 or 6 at home. I had to drive a truck and I couldn't drive a truck. It was a big truck. But that was my first film. And then, so I did little bits, but I realized how little I understood about camera and stuff like that. So the first one, I guess, the really big one was kind of Braveheart, and that was 94. So yeah, I would have been, whatever it is, 38, 9, somewhere around there.
And by the way, that's young. It's just by Hollywood standards. I think it's inspiring for actors to hear that.
No, it's yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was teaching for 10 years, so I went full time when I was 34, and that was a change of life for me, and fantastic. Obviously, felt very at home for the first time, I guess, in a real sense.
And Key, for you, I know you didn't wait till you were 38, so feel bad following.
I gotta say, I'm geeking out right now because I cannot believe I'm talking to Brendan, Paul, and Eddie, who I've admired for so long. Well, I was very lucky. I got my SAG card when I was 12 years old, thanks to Steven Spielberg and George Lucas when they cast me in a movie called Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So that was my first movie. I didn't know anything about, this business. I didn't go looking to be an actor. Acting kind of found me. And that was my first time on a movie set. And that's also the reason why I fell in love with acting, and I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. And interestingly enough, when those opportunities dried up and I had to step away from acting, I did not give up my Screen Actor Skill card. Every year when those dues came in, I would pay it automatically. There was no hesitation, even though the thought of being an actor again never crossed my mind. But it was just, I felt so proud to be a member of this organization that I did not ever want to give it up. And I guess in a way, if I stop paying the dues, then that dream of ever stepping in front of the camera would be completely gone, and I didn't want it to be gone. So I pay my dues for more than 20 years. And when I went and auditioned for the Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and when they told me I got the part, the first thing our producer, Jonathan Wong, asked me was, "Are you still a member of the Screen Actors Guild?"
Wow.
Luckily, I pay all my dues all those years, and I say, "Yes, I am." So that's how proud I feel to be a member of this.
Well, and also you wanted those free screeners, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, I love those screeners. But I all those years I always loved going to the movies and watching it with the audience. That's the best way to experience a movie. And yes, when those screeners came in, I would still watch it for the second or the third time. But my love for the movies is in a movie theater.
Fantastic. So going from the first to kind of the latest, you're all here today because you've been nominated for your amazing work in recent films. And I'd love to know sort of how the roles came to you and what interested you in being a part of the films. And I want to start with Paul because, we were just talking about Steven Spielberg, and I think that that's every actor's dream to work with him. Did he reach out to you directly about the Fabelmans? And did you know you would essentially be filling the tall order of playing his father?
No, so I got a text just saying Steven Spielberg wants to meet with you, and it's not a text I had received before. So, and this was during the pandemic, sort of high pandemic times, and so it was really a well-needed jolt of energy. I didn't know anything about the film. I, of course, Googled unmade Steven Spielberg projects and was trying to guess what could it possibly be. And should I shave? And do I wear my glasses? And, what? And I felt like, starting at the beginning, it was the most nervous I've felt in a long time for a meeting. And partially just meeting Steven on Zoom too, and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to meet, and as soon as we started speaking, he was so sort of emotionally open about what the film he was going to make was. And his father had only passed about 8 months before him and I met. So our first conversation was really wonderful because I could just sort of see how vulnerable he was in his eyes. And it sort of opened the door for me to not be nervous, but just to sort of, talk openly about family and I've certainly never felt like I'm an actor who should play every part or wants to play every part even. But as soon as he told me what the film was about, I really wanted to be there. I could just sort of, again, feel through him what it meant to him. And I thought something great would come from him. I mean, I thought it could be, it sounded like a special film. So we Zoomed a couple more times. And then finally on our third Zoom, he had an unlit cigar in his mouth. And he said, I think you'll make my dad proud. And that's how he told me I got the part.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, like, even if you hadn't gotten the role, just getting to spend that time with Steven Spielberg, I have to imagine was incredible. Is there a part of you that when you got that texture, like, Steven Spielberg knows who I am?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Why does he want? Why? I mean, we all have this. Why does he want to meet me? And that he knows me and knew my work, but again, I feel really fortunate to have gone through this sort of super personal journey with him, and which continues today, even as we're all doing this. To now spend time with him as a man is also a lot different than when Bert is guiding the way. So it's just been a true pleasure, and it's something I'll cherish, for a long time.
And Eddie, it feels like you were cast against type in The Good News as The Good Nurse as serial killer Charles Cullen. I mean, I hope you were cast against type. How did this project find its way to you? And were you actively looking to do? I mean, you always do something different, but was there something that sort of appealed to you about being the villain?
I can't get the image of Steven Spielberg on a Zoom call with an unlit cigar.
I know. I want to know what his username is.
That's amazing. This film, honestly, I'm not an actor that can say this is the part I've always wanted to play, or even go sort of chasing specific types of role. Occasionally, people ask you that question, and I've never been able to answer it because the work that I've done that's most interesting has always been when someone's seen something in me that perhaps I don't see in myself. And in this case, a brilliant man and director called Tobias Lindholm 6 years ago had approached me about this script, which was written by Christy Wilson Cairns, and it was a story that I just couldn't believe I didn't know, given that the man that they were interested in me in playing was the most prolific serial killer in American history, and how could that story have been buried? So Jessica Chastain was playing Amy Lochran, and she's someone that I've known for many years and always massively admired her work. And so it was a very thrilling thing. But the interesting thing is, as actors, we also know is that the reality was the film fell in and out of financing, and it took another 6 years to get made. But sometimes that happens with work, but often the team will change. It'll be a new group of people by the end, but we all stayed with it, and it was a really, despite the intensity of the subject matter, it was a really thrilling experience to me.
And you've played real people before, obviously, but do you find that changes your approach when you have, real material to draw on? Not that, Charles Cullen isn't as recognizable as Stephen Hawking, but still.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm still, 20 years in trying to work out what the hell my approach is. I suppose the good thing about playing someone real is it dictates certain things, like certain technical things. And I was very lucky with The Good Nurse that the story is based on this book by a man called Charles Graeber, brilliant book. And it's filled with psychological reports, really detailed biographical information. And it was almost like being presented with this Bible as an actor. So that was an amazing jump off point, but also the character that Jessica plays, Amy Lochran, was very much part of the making of the movie, and I got to spend time with her, and she talked in detail about the kind of complexity of their relationship and how, even though he's now in jail for doing these horrendous things, and she, helped catch this man and stop him, the complexity of that relationship was kind of at the crux of the movie, and that, I suppose, there was all the technical stuff you could do, but the emotional stuff came from her. Really.
And Brendan, you reunited with your In Bruges director, Martin McDonagh, and co-star Colin Farrell for the Banshees of Inisherin. I'm not going to ask, what made you want to reunite after all these years, because I think people have been pressuring you all for some time to see this reunion. Was it more a matter of, you didn't want to let everyone down when you finally did it?
Well, I think for Martin, that was a big part of it, because, he wanted to get that team together again, because the work felt it benefited from the way we worked together. So he produced one about 7 years ago, a script that it was partially based on a thing he had done as a play in his 20s, and he sent it to myself and Carl, and it was the nature of it was different to what emerged, and particularly for my character, there wasn't an awful lot of explanation or backstory or exploration possible within it. It was just he was presented as such. So we had a chat, and he knew, he was like, I think he was frustrated with it. He knew there was something about it that he didn't like. And then about 4 years afterwards, he was going through something, I think, in his personal life, that when he read the first couple of pages, it completely made sense to him. And he said, no, this opening is great. And then he rewrote the thing in about 10 days or something. And he came back. I basically had been slavering at the mouth for his script, having had the discussion 7 years ago. And then I thought again, like the lads, it's like, I just said, okay, this isn't going to happen. It has to happen. It might, it won't, it didn't. And then it did for a second, and then it went off and it was postponed. And it was just, but the script that came back was full of heart, in a way that I think was a real progression for Martin, in the sense that he really did open himself up a bit in an emotional kind of a way. And like in Bruges, there were certain kind of aspects about it, and like basically myself and Colin are two parts of his head, the two sides of his head, and one is saying one thing and the other thing is the opposite. And of course the truth is somewhere in between, or the dramatic tension is somewhere between. And so it became you always laugh at a Martin McDonagh script through the reading, and then it's the laughing not so much afterwards, because it deals with something a bit more basic than that. So I was the fact that it actually got up and running, pandemic tried to put it off for a while as well, but it's such a thrill, when you get a script that you can't wait to do, isn't it?
Now, I know you're not playing yourself per se, but he did write it with you in mind. And it's you get to use your natural accent, you get to play, be a musician. Did that make it easier for you to sort of step into that skin, or is it still a challenge every time?
Well, it was, you wouldn't think so, but the accent is different.
Sorry, I'm Irish. I should know better.
It was a West of Ireland accent. So there was, and the whole thing with clarity and all that. But I felt relatively easy, I'll be honest. You're right. It was I could put that suit on pretty easily. The music was different because I had to play the fiddle, and I can kind of make a fist of playing the fiddle, so to speak. But I had to do it at one stage with 3 fingers. And it was like, so I said to him, can I make up, when the center of this thing is about this guy wants to, I mean, it's basically a conversation. It's very interesting that with all of us here, all of the movies have this dichotomy, this kind of tug of war between humanity and niceness, being part of the world, and then being the creative artist that is slightly outside and that it has to follow. You know, there's a huge kind of thematic kind of a confluence. Everybody has nice characters, we eat solid characters, and then characters who are driven for other things. It's just fascinating that that's in the zeitgeist to such an extent. But I asked him, could I make up my own tune so that when I played it, I would inhabit it in a way. And he said, well, it's up to yourself. It's between you and Carter Burwell. So make best tune win. But he said, yeah, I'd be open to it. Yeah, no pressure, Carter. Yeah, thanks. So I was able to, over the months and months, I had given my fiddle away, and then the film was postponed, and then it went to Slovakia and didn't come back because it was being repaired, and don't talk to me. But suddenly, once I got my own fiddle back, the kind of tune came pretty quickly. I couldn't get there before that, and I knew I'd turned the corner when that happened, because it was an expression of the character in a way. And then Martin really liked it. That was almost like getting the role, because I didn't know, and I sent it to him, and he loved it. So the other thing that was different, possibly not to go on about it, but the other thing that was different was that myself and Colin are kind of fairly deep friends. So that Martin was deliberately going through on that, fault line and saying, well, okay, what happens if there's a schism? And so that was very interesting to negotiate.
I know people obviously always associate people with their characters. And so some people are very upset at how mean you are to poor Colin Farrell.
Yeah, I have a little bit of another take on that.
I agree with you.
I think it's very difficult for somebody, and I often put it to people who say, okay, if you're with somebody who's quite in need of your support and your life is being crushed, I think if somebody said that there's a woman in a relationship where her exploration as a person is being crushed on a daily basis, that they want to move on, but they feel that they have to mind and care for somebody who can't deal with the breakup. And it's the nature of all that I think Martin was exploring. Like, is Colin expected to stay and crush his thoughts of trying to make something beautiful in the world because the other guy can't actually deal with a breakup? So I actually did feel quite invested in the idea that the person who's to do the breaking up does not get away scot-free. In fact, it kind of, it's not great. Obviously, he has more agency in what's happening up to a point, but there's a little bit of emotional blackmail that's happening all the time. And it's not, I think he tried to do it clinically with one blow, and that didn't work. He tried to be kind, and nothing worked. I think in the end, it's about the civil war that's happening on the other side. This is how humans split, and this is how horrible things happen because people feel deeply about what seems to be a triviality to others.
And he's not doing anyone any favors by, staying for his friend. Like, it's the best thing for everyone. I think people understand that. It's just so rare we see male friendships portrayed that way, or really any friendships on screen.
Well, exactly. And I think it was interesting keeping the whole sexual aspect out of it. It didn't get in the way. Martin said that specifically. He didn't want that getting in the way, that lust has its own kind of mad horse. So there was this thing about, there's no question that Colin's performance means that you deeply feel badly for the person. He did not do anything wrong. But, it's the old line, it's not you, it's me. It's like, the reality is such, and the wounds that happen because people believe deeply in that this is the way they should live their life. The whole, as I say, I'd love to have a chat with the lads at some point. Maybe we'll see each other in less awkward circumstances. But the idea of niceness You know, we talked about, you know, a good man, a nice man, and then this other kind of opposing force where people are half part of the world and half out of it as artists. It's very real in all the movies. All the movies deal with it, and the pain, you know, and the legitimacy of being nice for its own sake. Anyway, sorry to be banging on. I'm taking up too much time. But I congratulate all the lads as well. I really do. The performances are there. They're all about that strange kind of war where people, and just such beautiful humanity in all their work. So it's a pleasure to be with you all, guys. And okay. I'll see you at the party. And let's just have a party. Good luck to everybody and anybody.
Well, speaking of niceness, Wayman Wang, he has a whole beautiful, breathtaking speech about that, about being kind to each other. And, you know, people who have seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, we know how well it works. But when you got that script, I mean, you had stepped away for some time. So I don't know how long it had been since you'd actually read a script, but did that script just look like chaos, or did you know that it was going to work?
You know, it was a script that I wanted to read, you know, for the longest time. In fact, I mean, before I got a hold of that script, just the idea of me stepping in front of the camera, I had a conversation with my wife for an entire year, just because of the uncertainty of it and the difficulty of being an actor again after a 20-year hiatus. And then when she was, you know, very supportive of me, and when I realized that I have to do this, because the fear of me having any regret of not giving voice to this dream that I had for the longest time overwhelmed any fear that I had. And so when I decided to do this, and I called up an agent friend of mine and asked him, begged him to rep me, 2 weeks later, this script came along. When I sat down at 1 a.m. and I turned the first page, I got so emotional because, one, it was about this beautiful Asian immigrant family. And second, I was so accustomed to reading scripts where my character doesn't show up until page 40 or page 80, and then that was it. But to see it on every page was so refreshing for me. And I wanted to read this for the longest time. And for some reason, I think maybe it's just because it stemmed from the hunger of wanting to do this. I understood the script from day one. And I don't understand every script I read, but I thought it was just beautifully written. And all these ideas of like how to play Wayman came flooding in, and I was just imagining, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then very quickly, the reality set in. And I said, Kia, there's no way they would offer you this role, this huge role in a movie that stars Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis. And I'm like, no, forget it. And then it was my wife who believed that I can do this. And I asked her why, and she says, one, you thought this role was written for you. And second, I've never seen you want anything more in your life than this. And when I went into audition for the first time, didn't hear from the Daniels for 2 whole months. Now, as you all know, 2 months is a long time. It's like, I called my agent, I said, what's going on? And he said, we haven't heard anything back. So any thought of me landing this role was completely gone by then, but it was my wife who truly believed in this. And she kept, giving me confidence, says, Keith, you will get this role. And sure enough, 2 months later, I got the call to audition for the second time. And then shortly after that, when I got that phone call, when I heard, those 3 words that we want you to play Wayman, it was one of the happiest days of my life. I jumped up so high. I screamed at the top of my lungs for so long. My wife heard it from another room, came running in. She took one look at me. We did not say one word to each other. And she came over, she gave me the biggest hug. She already knew that I got it. That was the whole process. And me stepping in front of the camera on day one, I will never forget it. I felt alive. It was something that I always wanted to do. Didn't think I would ever get another chance like this. And you know, everything that has happened since has been just incredible. And here I am. Look, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you guys. How great is this? It's so surreal to me.
Can I ask a question, Matey? Did that fear then, or was when you turned up on set on day one, had all fear gone then? Were you instantly so connected to that character that it was, because I struggle with that, particularly early on at the beginning of shooting, like that each time it feels like slightly overwhelming those first few days? Or when you came on set, did you feel like you just had this?
You know, I had 3 months of prep time before principal. So, I mean, I hired like an acting coach, a dialogue coach, a voice coach, a body movement coach, and I was very, very well prepared. But again, Eddie, you're exactly right, because when you step in front of the camera on day one, you don't know that your interpretation of this character is what the directors are looking for. So even though I was confident going in, then all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with all of these fear, all these insecurities. And that was when I kept running up to the directors and Jamie Lee Curtis, Michelle Yeoh, and I said, did I do okay? Is this like, because they were, you know, these are all legendary actors. And I was so afraid that I would, one, let them down, ruin the scene. And second, it was just my tremendous love for this character that I wanted to do it justice. I wanted to give it my all. And I was very, very nervous for an entire week. I was very insecure until Jamie Lee Curtis, God bless her, came up, gave me the biggest hug after one shot. And she says, Key, that was effing incredible. And going forward, I gained all my confidence back.
Wow. Is it like that for the rest of you? Do you still get like first day of school jitters when you show up on a set, or are you pretty calm at this point?
Crushing, debilitating fear and nerves. And of course, yeah, I mean, going into day one, sometimes it's absolutely excruciating. And then I think I've always remember hearing Greg Popovich, the basketball coach, talk about healthy fear. And so I'm always trying to bring that back up. Like, how do I make this healthy? Like, how do I use it just somehow? And it's something I've heard acting teachers say, and an acting teacher I work with, like, it all conspires towards the work. Somehow you're feeling this way for a reason it can be used. And I hate hearing that, because you're like, you just feel I can't possibly use this. It's because it's so, but I think that, I don't know, I guess that's right, that the jump the leap out of the plane we all take, and you're giving yourself over, and you're in front of people you admire, there's just something always for me about day one and day two, that how do you just let yourself release into this? And luckily it usually ends up happening, but not without its work. And then I just want to, before Brendan, you answer that, I just want to say, Key, it's so beautiful to hear you talk so openly about wanting it, because I think I feel so guarded talking about acting and what we do, partially because I probably just wouldn't know who I was if I wasn't an actor and thus wasn't a SAG member. And the thought of that is like so scary that I have trouble even going near it. So it makes me feel really inspired hearing you talk about your work and your journey.
I wondered about that, because when he was talking about how he didn't know if he would come back, it looked like some of you were sort of agreeing. And I also wonder if, in addition to the first day of school jitters, you still have that fear that every job is your last.
I'm hoping every job is my last. I'm at that place.
No, that's true too.
No. I think a lot of it has to do. It's very interesting, the idea of the first day, and then about that insecurity is definitely there. I've just kind of turned a corner now where I can let it go. I'm old enough at this point. Like, I've put in 30 years of it, what I loved, and I'd love if I had a load of stretching out, which I might do, but I'm okay with leaving, not being afraid of the insecurity. But I remember, that's only happened last year. But it's interesting who the people that you work with, like in terms of the trust that Paul was talking about, and Eddie, like again, what marked all these performances, and it was like there was an ability to allow the artifice to drop and to allow the genuineness, but you have to do that with somebody you trust. And I think that's, I'm not going to talk anymore because I talk too much. So, but the thing that you could trust the people, that you can go wherever it goes and leave it in somebody's hands that will go into an editing suite and mind it and be, when you can leave all that fear and just say, I'm taking the leap, as you said, Paul, I'm jumping out of the plane, that's it. And you just trust the parachute, and the parachute of the people that you're working with, and particularly obviously a director and a writer or whatever. It's a pretty beautiful thing just to kind of, what they always do in acting school, don't they, is all drop back into somebody's hands and just let yourself fall back into it. And I think that's what marks this whole working at this level is what I value about it, is that the people who come here and do this work are the best. They're the best, and the people you can trust. It's a kind of a pretty beautiful thing to be able to trust to another human being, that not only are they creatively interesting, but that emotionally you can leave the caution and the fear at the door once you jump in.
Eddie, for you, do you still get nervous on the first day or the second day?
I do. Yeah, I find it so odd filming that you create often these characters in a vacuum. Key, it sounds like you had rehearsal on your film, and I was lucky actually on this film that Tobias, our director, insisted on a month's rehearsal, so that you've had moments to make sure that you're all telling the same story. But I had a thing where I have a wonderful dialect coach, a guy called Michael Buster, and I've been working, like Charlie Cullen was from New Jersey, and he had a little burr of something, and so I've been working with Michael. I used to need to do technical stuff long in advance because I'm not a natural. Like I can't just jump into accents so I've been working with Michael on Zoom for a few months, and as we were rehearsing the film, goodness, I was driving from New York to Connecticut every day, and I had this great teamster, lovely guy called Danny, and I'd get in the car and I'd put my earphones in, listening to Michael, listening to our sessions and running over the dialogue, and we got to about 3 days, and my dialect coach wasn't going to be on set, it was just prep, and it got to about 3 days before we started filming, and I was running over the lines and stuff, and then I arrived at work, and Danny turned to me, and he was from New York, and he was like, "So Eddie, what accent are you actually trying to do?" And I was like, oh God, this is like a disaster. This was like 3 days before we started filming, and I was sort of almost quit. I was like, oh my God, please send me back on a boat. I need to get out of here immediately. Anyway, and so that all of that stuff just like feeds in, and particularly like, I mean, Paul, for you, mate, with Steven Spielberg playing his dad on day one. I mean, that and the oddness of what the first shot, the first scene that's chosen is, it's so weird. But like, how did you see that?
I'll just tell a funny thing real quick, which is, so this kid Gabriel Abel plays Sammy, and he's wonderful. I mean, he was I think 18 when we shot, and Steven shot the home videos or Sammy's videos first, the first few days, so that we could actually watch them whenever we did in the film. And so it was just Sammy and the kids the first few days, and then I show up, and Gabriel starts going, "Steven's so different with you here." I'm like, what does that mean? In my head. And I'm like, wait, he's my kid. I can't show that I'm vulnerable or scared, right? I got to be his dad. And he's like, he keeps going. He's like, man, Steven is so different with you here. And it was like, yet Steven's dad, like showing up on set, like, everybody sort of said like it. And then I saw it a couple days later when Michelle first showed up on set playing his mom, and he just started weeping. Wow. And so it was, at the same time, when your director is that, again, sort of vulnerable, it trickles down to the crew too. Like everybody, it kind of actually I think unites everyone, that we're all kind of here to make something, that this person who we, admire, cares this deeply about and is putting himself out there. So, as I'm sure it's true enough with all of you guys, there is always that self-conscious step, and including with people, somebody like Steven, right? And then if we can just allow them to become our collaborator at a certain point, and that might have taken a little longer with somebody like Steven, probably because I was nervous, but that's really when it starts to, when you start allowing yourself to make something, even though you might admire that person or you might whatever, and just be their collaborator. But it was definitely at times a heavy cloak to bear, because he didn't always get along with his father, and the energy was certainly in the room, and it was wild.
In terms of the consistency, if he was accessing a particular, that thing where he wasn't getting on, or where he remembered times that weren't so great, and then the following day, there was a vibe where, but he was such a lovely man too. Was Stephen's kind of continuing retrospective relationship with his father make your day different?
Well, I think so, but I think in a really sort of unconscious or more ineffable way. Like, okay, there's energy here in this soundstage. Like something is happening, and each day was different. And even though it's a film that's sort of baked in nostalgia and has a beautiful sense of nostalgia, it actually felt very present tense and alive making it, because Steven was constantly having memories. Tony Kushner was on set every day, and we might rewrite something. Steven would come in, his best ideas would happen on set. He'd be like, oh, the kid should project the movie into his hand. And it's like this image that that's the film. That's the right. And so you're there so he's a very intuitive filmmaker. It's not about intellectualizing on set. He likes to work fast and with a lot of intuition. I think it took a moment for it to become the Fabelmans, which was always the goal. I don't look anything like his father. It wasn't to mimic or imitate, right? But we all had to kind of release into, what this film was, especially given that there was sort of so much stake in the history for the filmmaker himself.
All of your films have such fabulous directors. They're just fantastic. And I'm so curious, and Paul, you're a great director yourself, having made a film. What is it you really like from a director? Like when you show up to set, what is it you're hoping for, or maybe, hoping won't happen?
Well, for me, it's collaboration, and I'll just leave it at that. I love a collaborative experience. So that's why I was interested in how the lads were getting on, with their various directors, because for me it's all in where you raise the bar for each other.
I think we talked about this. The first week for me is you're trying to find the character. You're really nervous, and the first week I really looked to the Daniels to help me find my way, and they did exactly that. And then I'm always, as an actor, I always welcome like notes or anything. I have zero ego. So if they feel like they need me to read a certain line in a certain way, I'm all open for that. Again, like Brendan said, it's this collaboration process. And through that, something beautiful comes out on the other end. And yeah, I've been very, very lucky to work with some of the greatest directors of all time, like Steven, who I love and adore, for many, many years. Wong Kar-wai, who we dedicated an entire universe to. I just love it when directors are very confident and they come up and they, and they help me. And yeah, I love the process.
You said something that I've heard so many actors say, which is that you don't mind being given a line reading. There seems to be this idea that that's a bad thing, but I've heard so many actors who are like, no, it's okay. Tell me how you want to hear it.
Well, a lot of times, directors don't want, because we're actors and the very great directors are very sensitive to our feelings. And sometimes they feel like, whatever you say, they have to respect that creativity. I don't. I'm very open to it, and I think a lot of great actors, are open to it. And it's the same thing when you work with great directors. Sometimes when you have an idea, they are open to it. To what if I can do it this way? What if you will put the camera this way? You might, they're open to that. And I think it's best when people put their egos aside and they just really focus on the script and try to make the best work we can. And that's exactly what happened on Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Eddie, for you?
Yeah, for me, I think what both Key and Brendan have said, but like that word collaboration is a big one. The thing that was eye-opening for me on this film with Tobias was every week he would call all the cast and crew around, and on the first week he would talk about the week's work, what they were aiming to do next week, the story they were telling. He would then hand a gift, which was like a box of chocolates or a bottle of wine or something, to someone on the crew who had been particularly helpful to him that week. And the following week, that person would hand a gift to, at this moment when he was recounting the week's work and talking, that person would hand it to. So you had this cross. It would be like he would give it to a costume supervisor who would, give it to, one of the ADs who would get, and it was to a grip, to a gaff. And it was this extraordinary thing that it collected everyone once a week. It made everyone engaged in the storytelling. So no one was here for the day, just to do the job, just for the work. It was about us, that collaboration that Brendan was talking about. And I just can't tell you how it shifted the spirit. It was unlike any film set I've ever been on. And it was such a simple human idea about us all making this thing together. But it was really unique and wonderful. And interestingly, that stayed, that love that we all had for the making of it stayed through to the promoting of the film. And, working with, we sort of said to Netflix at the end of the thing, like, we've had this amazing, and so all of the people at Netflix upkept that same sort of ethos. And it just made the whole thing, like, everyone feel that they're most relaxed to do their best work, I suppose.
Paul, when you were talking about kind of those first day jitters, I'm curious, when you directed your movie, obviously you're working with Carey Mulligan and Bill Camp, who aren't people we think, would be nervous on that first day. But are you sort of aware of that as a director, of trying to put people at ease? Is there anything that, you tried to do or on the set of Wildlife?
Yeah, I think it's almost a bit like parenting, maybe, where you're just trying to help everyone be their best self. And so you have to look at every actor's different, and every director's different. And so I think, part of the job there on the directing side is, I think, to see, well, what does that person need? And just how can you just help them be that they're the actor they want to be, and maybe to even openly talk about that if they want to beforehand or not. And so, we work with each actor, even hair differently, but I think creating, I love hearing Eddie's story about the way Tobias works, because I think I really love being on a set when everybody is a part of it. I just like, you can feel when the crew is, I know on a Daniel's movie it's like that, and I'm betting, when you guys were making this movie in Ireland, Brendan, it felt like that with the crew. Not that you're necessarily chatting all day, but I just mean, you can feel when a movie is unified and walking towards something, and it's just it's a really good feeling. And just on the topic of all our nerves and stuff, we've all been able to say, oh, it could take a day or two, and we're so lucky that we're here as supporting actors and we had multiple scenes, but I'm always just so blown away by the actors who come in and do one scene and just fucking crush. And like, you just like, I just think, and I've had, starting out, right, you do a day on a movie and you've had to do it yourself, but there's just, it's just so incredible to watch all the actors who come through our productions.
But isn't it, when you've just one scene, there's a kind of a liberation in that, don't you think? The way there are no consequences that you have to kind of deal with further down the line. So
Brendan, I totally disagree with that. I feel like if you come in and do one, like, I always come up and like screw up various of those early scenes. At least I'm like, I've got a few more days to try and fix it. Whereas like, if I've got one, I mean, if I have one scene, and I did lots of this like early on, you know, in different jobs, and I just can't, the performances are so awful because I just see fear just like riddled across.
I was going to ask you about that, about like in time when we're talking about trust and stuff like that, like, you know, like plotting what the reveal of what you have to reveal. So it takes a massive trust to decide not to give any clues on the way, or that the clues could be misinterpreted, or like there must have been a huge trust involved. That, I mean, did you shoot it chronologically? I think that's kind of an interesting question, whereby, you know, the denouement came near the end.
Yeah. We were really lucky that we did get to shoot it pretty much chronologically. But the massive insight there, Brennan, was that the real Amy described how he was two different human beings. How he was this kind, gentle man who saved her life, and then she met this other man in which his eyes would glaze over and he would just turn into an empty vessel. She met him twice. And when she told Jess and I that, it meant that we could really invest in the truth of this friendship. Like she sees it as a disassociative personality thing. And it was up to, what was lovely, it was then about Tobias finding any other textures or moments or things. And so it was actually really freeing. But it definitely helped that we shot a lot of the stuff, particularly in the hospital, chronologically.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Again, I want to thank you all so much for being here and for talking to your fellow actors about your craft. And again, congratulations on all the success. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jenelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenelle.
We'll see you at the party, guys.